Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to Freedom Deals Live. So for those that are new, what we do today, or what we go through in Freedom Deals Live, is we go live through due diligence of projects. These can be projects that I'm currently looking at, putting under contract. They can be deals that I already have under contract. Sometimes they can be deals from my past where I think there's certain things out of that deal that I think will be a benefit for you to learn. Today, we're actually looking at one that's very fresh. So truth be told, I haven't actually gone through this in detail myself as yet. So we really are truly going to be doing that together. So this one literally landed on my desk this morning. It's something we are looking at. And so, for those that are watching live, I do ask you to respect the fact that I'm being generous in sharing this live. There is obviously risk to me that I introduce competition, but I'm trusting in the good faith of people that they won't take advantage of what I share. So that being said, I think it's time for many of you that we keep going back over these things and go, all right, where do we start? So you start putting in the comments now what you think my first actions should be. What are the first things? If you were in my office with me right now, what are the first instructions you would give me to do in this due diligence? Understanding the comments can be a bit delayed, so that's okay. But I want you to start driving this process. I want you to drive what are the next things we should be looking at? What are the first things we should be looking at? What are the key deal killers? Because remember, when we're doing due diligence, we want to think of it like a filtering system. What are the biggest filters that are going to knock out most deals? Because we want to spend as little time as possible on each deal. Because for those of you that have been looking at this for a while now, I'm sure the penny has dropped, or it will drop soon, that you realize that you need to go through many deals to find the good ones. There's lots of rubbish out there. And then there's also plenty of sites that site is fine, but it's the wrong vendor, the wrong circumstances, and price expectations are just not workable. So you do need to go through a lot of deals to find the good ones. Robert Kiyosaki always said, after you've looked at 100 deals, you've probably put in 30 offers, maybe put 10 in writing, and you might secure one, something along those numbers. And these days, because of technology and how accessible everything is to everyone, and how much more competitive I would say the market is, I'd say the numbers are much higher. You need to look at 1,000 deals, probably put in 100 offers, and 30 of those might go to contract, and you might buy one. Now, for those that are starting out, that might be very daunting numbers going, you can't be serious. I need to look at 1,000 deals to find one. Yeah, maybe more. So that is why it's important to start to learn how to filter through these things quickly. So for those of you that have been watching for a while, the first things that we need to look at. What are the things that are commonly the deal killers early on? Yep, Gary here, and you completely agree. Lots of competition in the market right now. Yeah, the market at the moment is incredibly hot. For those that this is in Brisbane, I'm talking different in different areas. But for those that pay attention to the longer term cycles, we are in the later stages of this 18-year cycle. And that does tend to be when we get to a point where we're all in. What does that mean? Well, what I'm seeing in the marketplace, which is very notable for this part of the cycle, is I wouldn't say we're all in yet, but what is becoming commonplace is people that typically are on the sidelines or assisting in the developments are now doing developments themselves. So now it's not just developers doing them, it's the civil contractors are buying sites themselves. There are engineers buying sites themselves. There are town planners, surveyors. Every Tom, Dick and Harry now is becoming a developer. And this is very common for this later part of the stage where speculation is at its highest. So it is definitely a very competitive environment. Now, does that mean for those of you that are, I guess, new, does that mean I don't think you should get in? That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is it's competitive. So what a great time to learn and earn your stripes, because if you can exist in a competitive market when it's less competitive, you'll be fine. So the thing to be mindful of at the later part of the cycles, though, is when prices do start getting inflated, and being sure that you don't get sucked into the fear of missing out and just buying something to say that you've got a site. And some of you may think that's insane, but it happens all the time. People way more attached to the idea of becoming a developer and just finally getting that site that they just end up buying anything. And I have way too many stories to share of people that have done that have ended up either losing money or it's basically kept them tied up in that project for 5 years. And then they walk away. A recent example, they walk away with bugger all, if anything. And in all honesty, they got it out of generosity of the person that they got to fund the deal. They weren't actually entitled to it. So that would have been 5 years of work for nothing. And why? Because they bought a site they never should have bought. That's the plain truth. So great to get into good sites. You do not want to just buy a site for the sake of buying a site. Gary, services, zoning, frontage, contours, flooding, if applicable. Yep. Okay. So let's start on this one. All right. Now we've obviously got a bit of an unusual layout. So I'll turn on the satellite view so we can have a look. So we've got an existing house here. I'm going to call this a bit of dead space at the front here. Fine for a front yard. Good thing is we've got plenty of space down the side. Let's just have a quick measure. Obviously this is, I'll just open there. Let's have a quick measure. Obviously it's only rough, but it gives us an idea. Well, it looks like roughly 7 meters. That's fantastic. So side access should be doable. And then we've got a nice big backyard at the back. So from initial inspection, it appears workable that a rear access driveway could be done here down towards the back. And there is plenty of space, as in we've got 1,889 square meters in this zoning. They are large lots. The minimum 600 square meter lots for the front, 800 typically for the back. So we've got the space that we need for that. Now, one of the other things you've got to pay attention when you're doing rear access allotments, which often gets forgotten, is often if you have the available side access, it's typically because it was being used as the car access for the existing property. So if you're now using that as the rear access driveway, where is your car accommodation for the existing house? And so when you've got these properties that then have very small frontages or very small front yards, that can actually be an issue, having off-street parking for the existing house, let alone a garage. Now, this one here, we're a bit spoiled. This is an unusually large front yard for a property like this because of the dynamic of the street here. So we've got heaps of space here to have a new crossover, have a carport, or whatever it is that we decide to do if we went ahead with it. Let's have a look at the street view. So this is us here, or the one we're considering anyway. All right, so we've got overhead power connection here from a property pole, worth noting already, to overhead power over the road. This council's not a fan of overhead power when you do subdivisions. They will always push for underground power. So it's something to be mindful of. And then if this is going to become the access way for the rear lot, then we need car accommodation, which currently seems to be just the front yard's use anyway. So potentially a carport or something at the front here. But the good thing is we have plenty of space. So car accommodation in this case, not an issue, which is positive. We know we've got our power here, likely going to require underground power. All right, so frontage, not an issue. Access to the rear doesn't appear to be an issue, obviously subject to surveyors. For those that haven't done this before, don't ever assume that your fence is actually where the boundary is. I have had situations where and this is on pretty small projects, so it makes a big difference, where at the front here, the fence is actually 1.5 meters over here, away from the boundary, and at the rear, 1.5 meters over here. And in this specific example, what that meant was, it was actually the other way around. The fence was 1.5 meters on our property. What had actually happened was the neighbor unknowingly had built their carport and driveway technically on our land. Not exactly a 5-minute solution there. So never assume that the fence is actually where the boundary is. But assuming if the fence is actually relatively accurate, it looks like we've got enough side access here. Now, something we didn't really pay attention to on the street view is contours-wise, it looks like it falls towards the street, which is positive, yes. So drainage appears not to be an issue, at least at face value. The contours on this particular service here aren't great. So we can, let's forget which one it is. Topography, where are we? Bear with me, guys. So I find planning permits, planning layers. Oh, look, we're not going to hold up on that. Anyway, topography is what I'm after. I always struggle to find it on this one for some reason. But it looks like, at least from face value, that it slopes towards the street, which is always easiest for drainage. Okay, so next, let's start having a look at the services. See if there's any red flags in the services. Oh, actually, I should show you. So this is a mud map that my team did up, I believe. So roughly existing would be 948, rear lot would be 946. So as I said, in terms of the block sizes, plenty of space. Still very luxurious block sizes these days, so it looks to be fine. Okay, NBN. Yep, NBN is in the street, existing connection, so no issues there. Stormwater. All right, so there actually is some existing stormwater infrastructure in the street. Let's just have a closer look here. So this, without knowing more, to me kind of confirms the topography, as I mentioned, because why would they have these here unless they had to deal with drainage from these higher sections? So that there you can see curb inlet. So that's capturing water from upstream and taking it through a pipe down to a node in Blamey. And same down here as well. So again, just adds to the likelihood that our contours are fine going this way. But no actual infrastructure on our property. So based on what we're seeing here, it doesn't seem likely that we would need it anyway, because we've got that flow. But what can happen, which you need to be mindful of, is let's say the block slopes from back to front, but also from this side to that side. Well, if we're creating a block here, then the drainage of this block still needs to get out to the street. If it's flowing this way, it's now blocked by this property here. So what may end up happening is we may need to put a drain here with a pipe down to the street here to deal with the drainage for this property here, potentially. Or depending on the contours, potentially be able to tap into this what do we got there? It's a curb in, yeah, potentially be able to tap into this pipe if it's got capacity and if the neighbor actually allows it. So there's a few solutions there. Face value, I don't think drainage is going to be an issue. Obviously, to be confirmed once you've got a contour survey. Okay, so stormwater, nothing alarming at this point. That's good. Okay, so here we are again. All right, so water is across the street. Remember looking at the legend over here, that's a reticulation main, so that's good news. So water more than likely going to come across the street. So not an issue, but it's a bit more expensive than if it was on our side of the street. And then sewer, we've got an existing sewer fitting right here. So assuming that it has capacity, then sewer should not be an issue either. But we do have that same situation as what we're talking about with the stormwater is how is the rear block getting to here? Well, most likely, if the contours are this way, it is going to have to be a pipe down the side here, which then may end up with an easement on this front block. Now let's actually just check how much space do we have there. All right, so not a lot of space here. Lovely, beautiful pool there. Let's have a look. So only a couple of meters there. So that, look, that's something I'm not saying is a problem, but something that we need to tick off is the sewer solution, in that I believe this utility provider keeps changing their mind on what they want with easements. So that makes it challenging. Now, I know in a previous project, now we're going back 7 years, we had a similar situation and we were not allowed to run the sewer down through there, not because there wasn't technically enough room for the sewer, but they required a 3 meter easement over the sewer, and that easement, oops, what's this? Okay. The easement being 3 meters, there wasn't enough space for a 3 meter easement. So therefore we weren't allowed to run the sewer in that direction, even though it really would have been the best outcome. So we ended up having to run the sewer all the way around, which was much more challenging, more expensive. Now, this utility provider has recently been taking an approach of they don't want easements over existing infrastructure, but they're wanting it on new infrastructure. But then, yeah, again, we keep getting conflicting information. So that's one that I would need to investigate again as to where they are currently sitting at, because if our contours are going this way and that's where our sewer point is, then we need to get there somehow. And if it's falling this way, we can't exactly run the pipe uphill and then back around. So sewer is a question mark there, is what is our solution? The depth of that sewer makes a difference as well, because if it's super deep, it allows you a lot more flexibility in being able to run it a longer and sort of more elaborate way. Whereas if it's not so deep, you don't have a lot of flexibility because you've got to have appropriate fall the whole way. So are there other options that we've got? Well, look, there are options here, but they're not definite options. These neighbors would need to give consent to access this, the sewer here. So yeah, at least odds are in your favor in that you've got 2 neighbors that potentially you could request access from. Just looking at other things here. All right, and just looking from a practical perspective, is there, well, that's not good news. Okay, so you've got a shed there and a shed there, but theoretically nothing there, so it could be done there, it could be done there. Look, it's possible. There's a few different options. All right, I'm not going to say the sewer is a guaranteed solution. So there is a question mark there, which we would need to investigate. But look, let's assume for the moment that we can run the sewer down through here, down to this point here. Also flagging additional potential issue in the fact that if we have to run sewer and stormwater down there, it's starting to get a bit crowded. So yeah, look, there's some servicing question marks here that need to be addressed. So I'm not going to call any of them a done deal, as in like they definitely can be done. I believe that there will be a solution here, but it's something I'll definitely want to talk to my engineer with and go, all right, what are the practical outcomes we can look for here? And obviously trying to be as cost effective as possible. Okay, let's move on. So water across the street, sewer, hopefully here. Actually, in all honesty, these would actually be cheaper, but it does require their permission. So if I could swing it with the neighbors, these are the options that I would choose if those were workable. Much shorter, just a stub off, whereas here we're running, if we've actually got to run it that far, it's actually a pretty considerable run. Call it, yeah, 50 odd meters. That's not a short run. And then if you think of in terms of depth, what your flexibility is, if there's not much fall here, which I think there is, so I think we're fine. But if there's not much fall here, if that sewer is not very deep, then you can run into challenges of can you get enough fall on the pipe to actually achieve an appropriate sewer solution. Okay, what is next? Okay, Energex, we've already identified that there is overhead power in the street. So power is not an issue, but more than likely we're going to have to take it underground from that existing power pole connection would be my guess. APA, gas, doubt it in this area, but let's have a look. No. Just for your own knowledge, gas, there's never a requirement. Well, I've never come across a situation where there is a requirement for gas to make it a workable development. But what you do need to look at, which typically is only an issue on larger developments, but what you do need to know is, are there any gas mains or major infrastructure that are going to impact your site? So how could they impact your site? Well, one, if they're actually on your site. Now, again, not very common unless you've got a very large site, but it can happen. Where I have had it be an issue in the past was in the road in front of the site. So number one, it was a fairly considerable sized site. I forget how many lots, but I think it was maybe 20 lots. So we had to bring in some reasonable size infrastructure. The sewer was across the road. I think the water was across the road. There was a bunch of things we needed to do road crossings on. And smack bang in the middle of that road was a major gas line, as in the kind of thing that when you hit it, it goes boom and takes out a considerable space. So not the kind of thing you want to muck around with, and very reasonably the kind of thing they are very specific about how you need to work around. So it was a question as to whether or not we could get the sewer from one side of the street to the other side of the street because of that gas main in the middle. So that's where knowing where these services are is important. For example, in this one, if there was a gas main in the middle of the street and we needed to get the water across, it's not to say we can't get it done, but it's definitely complicated the exercise and therefore made it more expensive and probably takes longer too. Telstra, we don't care about because we've got NBN. Okay, let's have a look at some numbers. All right, any questions before we move on to the numbers? Any key learnings that you've had so far? Pop it in the comments. Let's see. Gary, you've been interactive today. Appreciate that. Everyone else has been awfully quiet today. So let's see if we can get some feedback from some others. While you do that, I will start plugging away at these numbers. So 1 into 2, actually, let me just think. Always a worthwhile question is, can you get more? Can we get more? Well, we've got 18 odd square meters in this area. You need 600 square meters per lot at the front. That would take up 1,200, which means we would need at least 2,000. It's not meant to include the access handle anyway. So you'd need at least 2,000 to be able to get another lot, at least. So do we have 2,000? Sharma, I'm not sure if that's your name. I'm just guessing off the thing. First time here, welcome. Very good to have you. What did I say we had for space? Well, if it is your first time, everything is learning. I was about to say, what's been the key things? Everything is learning. Well, that's a good place to be. Steep learning curve. 1889. So the answer is no. We do not have enough room to get an additional lot. And the thing is, even if we wanted to get an additional lot, it would require demolishing the house. And for those of you that have been on here for a while, what is the rule of thumb? How many additional lots do we need to be able to get to make it, in theory, worthwhile demolishing a house? If you had the meters squared, is it the fact that they don't like 2 houses on the easement in that council? If you had the meter squared, is it the fact that they don't like 2 houses on the easement in that council? 2 additional? Do you mean 2 additional dwellings at the on the rear block, or 2 additional rear blocks on that same access handle? Is that what you're getting at there, Rachel? I'll wait to see your response back. Sharma, 3 extra 2. Yeah, so rule of thumb is you need to be able to get at least 2 additional blocks to make it worthwhile demolishing a house, unless, of course, the house has got bugger all value. Which, look, this house I haven't seen inside yet, but apparently it is in the fair state of disrepair. So a bit of money is going to have to be put into it to get rid of it. Sorry, to bring it back up to spec. But especially in this day and age where construction costs are very considerable, any way in which you can retain the existing dwelling is a tremendous advantage in these smaller sites. So in this case here, if in theory we had enough land, be demolishing this house to get 1 extra lot. That's not going to fly. I can tell you right now, without doing the numbers, it won't work. Unless, of course, you bought it for an absolute steal. Whereas if this block was sitting across 3 lots, so demolishing it, we were able to create 2 additional lots. Okay, that could be something worth doing the numbers on. Rachel, 2 dwellings at the rear on the same easement. So, so if you've got that, now I'm careful of the words here. It's not necessarily an easement, that access handle. Typically, it is owned by the rear block, so it is an access handle, not an easement. But yes, in this council, the only way typically to do multiple dwellings at the rear is if you do a community title scheme. So then you create a body corporate situation. So in this particular zoning, in this area, it's not typically a favoured outcome. You might be able to do a duplex or something at the rear. There's a few other parameters that need to be looked at there. But so yeah, potentially you could do a duplex, but it's not as favored in this particular zoning. So yeah, but even in the higher density zoning, they have a rule of one driveway per block at the back. I know, which seems a bit crazy, unless it's a community title scheme, which then makes that driveway community property, and therefore there's a body corporate over it. And look, from a development perspective, we don't love it, but I do understand their reasoning for it, because what can happen, and has happened plenty of times, is if you think of, and I know Brisbane City was an example of this, I think you used to be able to do like 7 or 8 properties off one driveway. And the thing is, when there's damage to that driveway, who's paying for it? Because then you've got to get consensus from 8 different parties to go, okay, yeah, fine, we'll all chip in. Well, what do you think the chances are of getting 8 people to volunteer to put the money in? If you've got 8 people, fair likelihood you've at least got 1 or 2 duds in there. Sorry to say it, but whereas with and then there's the situation where then the maintenance never happens, or it just gets stuck in disputes, and then it gets worse, and the council doesn't want that. So that's why one of the reasons why they make it happen this way, because then there is a sinking fund, and then if maintenance is required, then it gets done. So, okay, so 1 into 2, let's have a look at some numbers. All right, so being a 1 into 2, all right, we want this to be at least 18 months, because realistically, especially for your first deal, a 1 into 2 sub is most likely going to take you 18 months. Now, depending who you ask, the timeframes that you get told will vary drastically. And this happens regularly where I'll have students or people I'm helping out, or even when I've investigated other areas, and the consultants will be like, oh no, 8 months for a subdivision here. 8 months, that's all you need. The thing you've got to remember is, what world are they living in? As in, what view are they looking at it from? And the example being is, if you ask a town planner, how long does it take to do a subdivision? The town planner is only involved up to the point of getting DA approval. That's typically their job, up to that point. What happens after DA approval, in terms of if there is operational works approval needed, or if there is, or there is always some element of construction needed, they're not involved with that part there. So in their world, they go, oh, subdivision is an 8-month exercise. But there is all of this dead time when it comes to, okay, you buy the site, you've got to prepare all your applications and all the rest of it. So it might take you 2 months before you actually lodge the DA, especially in these days with consultants and their timeframes. And then council has it for a month, and then they come back with an RFI, then they get it for another month. The months just spill out. So just trust me, no matter where you're at for your first project, for a 1 into 2, work on at least 18 months. And that is not assuming, that's assuming you're not doing a build. If you're building a dwelling as well, add another 12 months. You'll say, it doesn't take 12 months to build a house. No, it doesn't. But you'll be amazed at what gets in the way to block things. Example, current deal of ours, we have just started civils on it, and the surveyor's gone out to peg a few things out, and he's gone, oh, wow, that stormwater that we put on the detailed survey plan at the beginning, turns out we use the council records, and the council records are wrong by about 1.5 meters. That's a big amount, especially on smaller developments. So that's taken that stormwater pipe off one block and put it on the other block. That's now shifting an easement from that block to the other block. That block already had an easement on the other side. Now I've got an easement on 2 sides of that block, and we're building something on that. And we also need to put a retaining wall down there, which is now inside that easement. So there's all these flow-on effects, which it's now gone, oh, okay, now we need to make an application, which takes 4 to 6 weeks. And okay, now we're getting closer to Christmas. So will we launch the sale of the renovated house before Christmas, or are we now waiting until February? There's all of these flow-on effects every time one of these things happens. Okay, so let's say settlement time 3 months, lead-in period. That's until we get on site. Look, I'm just going to make that 10 months because we've got Christmas in between, and then that will do for now without getting too stuck in that. 20% buffer, that's on, this calculates it on construction. So whatever my construction budget is further down. Okay, so now from what I hear, they're wanting about $1 million. Let's just work on that for now. Now, sewer. Okay, so the question is, what are we going to do? What are we going to allow here for the sewer? So in your first runs, you're always better off operating on a more conservative basis, because while you might have a few wins, pardon me, and you might get a few cost savings, you're almost guaranteed to find other things that are going to cost some more. So you're better off, in my opinion, starting a bit fatter. So I'm going to work on the assumption that I've got to do that 50-meter run for the sewer. If I could, in the end, prove that that is a goer, so I know definitely, okay, I can definitely subdivide this, I'm willing to move ahead with it, and it works on those numbers, then if I achieve a win by negotiating with one of the other neighbors and getting a shorter run, that's a win and straight to my bottom line. Whereas if I work on definitely getting agreement from the neighbors and then they don't, and then I need to do the 50-meter run, you can see how that works out. Okay, so 50-meter run for the sewer. Look, this is really me having a stab at this one. I'm going to guess about 20 grand. It may require a manhole. It probably will require a manhole. So I'm going to make it 25 grand. Okay, so water, we are coming across the street. I'm going to make that 10,000. Stormwater, I don't believe we're going to have to, actually, no, sorry, we've got that pipe that we've got to go down the side as well. Look, I'm going to put 10,000 on that as well. So that's a 50-meter run as well. Power and telecoms. Okay, so we are going to have to go underground. So I'm going to work on our back of the envelope numbers of 7,000 per lot. Even though we've got an existing connection there, most likely they'll make us take that underground. So I'm just going to say 15,000. That's for design and doing the work. House demo we're not needing to do, which is good. Erosion and sediment control, I will leave that as it is. Okay, rear access driveway. How long have we got? So there actually is a driveway there already. But the thing is, you've got to get your services through. Now, if we're talking sewer and potentially up that way, but let's be conservative and let's say it's got to go up there, and let's say that it's 35 meters. Let's say that we need to remove that driveway because we've got to get all the services up there. All right, so 35 meters at, I think it's a minimum of 3 meters in this council. So what have we got? About 105 square meters. And I think off the top of my head, it's about 250 per square meter. All right, so about 26,000. Now that number that I'm working on, my level of confidence in that right now is not massive. So I'm going to round that up to 30,000. Now you can tell how rough I'm being with these numbers. And I'm actually doing that on purpose because I know when you're getting started, there's always this concern of what's the right number? Have I got the right number? Well, you know what? You don't need the right number right now. This is a first run feasibility. This is to see, look, are we even in the right area? If we're in the right area, then you move to get it under contract. Once you have it under contract, you worry about whether that is the right number or not. And you do that then by going and talking with your engineer, talking with your town planner, talking with civil contractors, talking with your electrical engineers. But you need to be very protective or very careful about how much you use their time. Because if you go to them for every single site you look at, soon they're not going to be responding to your emails and they're not going to be returning your phone calls. If you want them to add value to you, you need to be very careful about respecting their time, particularly in this environment where they are all massively under the pump. I met with my engineer a couple of weeks ago and he showed me his phone and he had over 50 text messages that he hadn't even seen yet from that day alone. Okay, so be very mindful of that. Don't go to all the people for just sites you're looking at when you've got it under contract. Obviously with get out clauses, so you're not locked in, but that's when you go and you see if you can get some assistance from those consultants, hopefully for free, maybe not, but be very cautious of how you use their time. Earthworks, I don't believe anything. Footpath, don't believe we need it. Seepage pit, no. Turf, leave that in there. Fire hydrants, yeah, good question. So there's no way of me knowing where the existing fire hydrant is on here unless it shows it on the water. Okay, so it's showing a water hydrant here. That's good news. Okay, so with, I don't know if this is all across Australia, but I think definitely in Queensland, you've got to be your frontage, or sorry, your whole property has to be within, I think it's 80 metres of a hydrant. Don't quote me exactly on that, but it's roughly that. So we are all good there because we've got this hydrant here, so up the rear access to the rear property and here. So we shouldn't need a hydrant. That's actually very lucky. That's right there. Couldn't get any better than that. So because they're about 25 grand from memory if you got to put it up a rear block. Retaining, I don't believe we need any. And so we can remove the hydrants. Fencing, let's have a look. What's the condition of the fencing? I think it's color bond actually. I think color bond all the way around from memory. So I think we're good with that, although we would need some separating here. So what are we going to need there? We're going to need about, let's call it 30. So let's just say 50 meters of fencing. Got a rate of 110 in there. Color bond, when I did this spreadsheet, was 120. I don't think you're going to get it for 120 anymore. So I'm just going to make that 140. Haven't done a color bond fence for a little while, so can't say for sure. And tree clearing. Look, there is a bit of edge at the back. And since we're not getting a demo crew out there, actually, we would need to do something about this shed here. So yeah, look, I'm going to put 15 grand in tree clearing, but I'm allowing that for the shed as well. But see, here's the thing. I don't know if we can actually see that shed. From the road to see what sort of quality it is. But when you've got sites with things like that on it, what does that look like? Is that a color bond situation or is it timber? Okay. So what I was going to say was, if you've got color bond sheds or color bond anything, carports or whatever, typically you can sell those on Marketplace. And people will come and get it and they'll take it away. So it costs you nothing to get rid of it and you make a bit of money. That there, I'm not so sure about. It looks like it's color bond on the sides. So look, maybe that thing can be sold, or maybe you can get someone to come and take it away for free. But look, I'll allow that 15,000 anyway as a figure for clearing veg and getting rid of that if we need to. Potentially having to rip up the driveway as well. Probably not enough if we've got to do that. But because it looks like there's some concrete here as well. So now we've got a reno, definitely. Now, I have no idea what state that house is in, other than I've been told it's not great. So I'm going to say 150,000 for the reno. Why? Because you basically get nothing done for 100 grand now. And I'm currently finishing a renovation on another property, which is similar vintage. That's probably going to cost us about 170, 180, I think, off the top of my head. It is a bigger property though. The good thing is it is a low set brick. So in terms of, like, if you let a timber house go, you've got a lot more work to do on the outside. Being low set brick, it's probably more of a touch up on the outside and, you know, maybe a new kitchen, bathroom, clean up on the inside. So it may not end up being that much, but look, let's just work with that for the time being. Okay, so all of our consultancy costs here should not vary much because it's a 1 into 2. Now, I think I've said this before. It's been a while since I did these numbers. They probably all need a little bit of escalation, but that's not going to make or break your FISO. When you look at the 108 for soft costs, that's including stamp duty and council headworks. Well, it's definitely gone up. That's like 35 grand in that council now. If all of this needs to go up 20%, okay, yeah, it's about a 20. Well, actually, it won't be the stamp duty and all that sort of stuff. So let's say it's a $10,000-$15,000 increase in your consultancy costs. Is that going to make or break a feasibility? No, it's not. So am I getting caught up on that right now? No. Remember, right now we are focused on the big ticket items. Is there merit in looking closer at this deal? Okay, so what can this all be sold for? All right, so initial feedback on the block, and just from knowing what we know of the area, maybe about 650 for that large block at the back. Now, if that block is worth 650 at the back, and again, this is very rough first run numbers. If that block is worth 650 at the back, and the front house is still going to be on around a 900 square meter block of land, which is pretty great, then I'm going to look at this from two angles. One, of what I know I've recently paid for sites in this suburb, which tells me that at least it's got to be in the 8s, possibly more. And then if we look at the fact that the land is worth 650, well, what is a house worth on top of it? Well, typically even a rundown house is still 150 grand or so of value on top, which that in itself already takes it to the 8s. If we've renovated the thing, okay, look, I'm going to say 900 as a first run. And again, very rough, but this is just based on what I'm seeing in the market at the moment. I could be wrong. I'm not buying it based on this decision. Let's just have a look. Right, interest rate. I'm going to put that at 7. Can we get better than 7? Yes, we can get better than 7. Why am I putting 7 then? Okay, why do you think I'm putting 7, guys? I'm going to keep moving on some other things, but I won't keep going all the way until I see some answers. Gary, BA alone is taking 3 to 4 months for new builds. Yeah, like the timeframes for developments, because of the red tape and compliance and all the new bits and pieces. And this is even, I've had internal people within council even venting to me now, them making submissions to the higher ups going, guys, this is getting ridiculous. More is being demanded of us in terms of, we're putting more on the developers to provide us with more, but we're getting less resources, as in the council has got less resources to process all of this stuff. So yeah, timeframes are definitely not getting faster. All right, so I've got 12% in there for the cash from an investor. I'm just going to work on the assumption that it's a JV for now, or I've got the money myself. Still no answers on the 7%. So 7%, guys, why are we using 7% when we know we can get better? What do you think? Oh, come on. Don't go all quiet on me now. Sharma, I know even you can have a guess at this one. Why am I using 7%? Because I know there's stuff out there in the 6s and the 5s and the buffer for inflation. Yeah, look, that's definitely one thing is, look, I'm not saying this is the case, but at the last RBA meeting, they did flag that inflation was slightly higher than expected. Doesn't mean it's going up necessarily, but towards the end of the real estate cycle, inflation does always tend to find a way to creep back in. So always better to be conservative. Number 2, second tier lender. Spot on, Gary, because when it comes to deal funding, don't just assume you get to go with the big 4s and get the cheapest rates. And in fact, many times you don't want to, because often the compliance you've got to jump through and how much longer they take, that's a cost as well. So when it comes to funding deals, it's not just about getting the cheapest interest rate. It's about who is providing you the most flexibility, who is providing you the best overall product. And there's a whole other topic there about strategy as to who to go to first and all the rest of it. But don't assume you're just going to go with one of the big 4. And for most developers, we don't spend our time with the big 4 with this sort of stuff. It often is the second tier lenders or even the non-bank lenders, because they offer much more flexible lending terms and higher LVRs. So I'm going to put 7%, which definitely wouldn't cover me if I was going a non-bank lender, but I'm going to go 7% because getting a standard investment loan on this one should be relatively easy. Land purchase, yep, 80% on the land. All right, let's have a look. How are we looking? Oh! Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Not looking crash hot. So am I surprised? No. Because if you're looking at a purchase price of $1 million and you've got gross realizations of 1.5, for those that are new to this, you might go, wow, there's 500 grand in this deal. No. Oh, look what is that emoji? Oh, rolling. So this is one of the biggest things to get your head around, because when you get into this, it seems initially like there's this big buffer. Oh, buying for $1 million. Oh, we can sell for 1.5. There's heaps of profit in this. Let's we don't normally go through this, but let's break this down a little bit. Okay. So especially with real estate prices going higher and higher and higher, there are a few of the largest costs in development that go up relative to the price. So it's not like, okay, when sites were 500,000 and it cost us, let's say it cost us 150,000 to do a subdivision. Seen enough of you to realize that by now. Good. You've learned more than you realize. So if sites were 500,000 and it cost us 150 to do a subdivision, as all in and out numbers, back of the envelope. If the price goes up to $1 million, the cost doesn't stay at 150. It's not how it works. Because, all right, well, let's have a look at a few things here. If our purchase price is $1 million, our stamp duty on the land is 40,000 based on these calculations here. All right, so back in the day, well, what do you know? That's a $20,000 difference right there. Okay, what other things does that impact? Let's have a look at the holding costs. Finance costs, 78,000. Well, when it was 500,000, it would have been more like 40,000. Those two things alone there, $60,000 difference in the cost base. Agents' commissions, relative also to the purchase price and the sales price. So we've got roughly 50 grand in commissions there. Back when they were half the price, that was 25 grand in commissions. You can see very quickly here how the costs just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's no secret the construction is getting more and more expensive. Now, look, is there a possibility that I'm out on some of these numbers? I'm 100% out on some of these numbers. But am I out enough to suggest that we might be in the ballpark here of the right thing? I don't think so. Because let's stress test this. Do I think there's any chance we're going to get more than 650 for the land? No. I think at the moment that is an absolute fair thing. In fact, could be on the higher end. All right, let's just play with this. Let's say that I'm out a fair whack on the house because it's still a big block of land and we're going to do a cracking reno and we can sell that house for $1 million. Tall order in this area. But what has that now done? That's also increased my agent's comms a bit. Not a huge amount. It's done it a bit. Let's have a look. Wow. It's made that much difference. So really, is there any scope for this deal at $1 million? No. Like for there to be scope, we've got to be selling that house at like 1.1, probably need to be out by 100 grand on the land too. Let's have a look. Does that get us there? Still doesn't get us there. Still not there. Holy smokes. Okay. So I needed to be out by, what was it? I think like 300 grand. I can't remember what I had there now. I think it's like $300,000 out on the house and 100 grand out on the land. Am I that far out? No, I'm not that far out. So really what this comes back to is, I think I was at 900. Yeah, so it was $300,000 difference. So really what this comes back to is the purchase price. It's too much. So let's have a look. Yeah. So look, maybe I am out a bit, probably. But either way, it means I've got to be out a fair amount down here and we've got to buy it a lot cheaper than what they're wanting. Sorry, I came in late. Is this just land sub 1 into 2? Yes, this is a 1 into 2 Battleaxe deal. 1.1 seems too much for Moray Field. Yeah, look, I totally agree. What I would say, though, is in this particular market, this is one of those examples of where if you are paying attention to the media and if you're getting your data and your pulse of the market from the masses, you are way behind. Way, way, way behind. The market in certain areas at the moment is moving at blistering speed. Absolutely blistering speed. So the only way for you to know what is truly happening in the market is to be in the market, or to be talking a lot with people that are in the market that are currently selling stuff that you can't yet see the data on because it won't settle for a while yet. So just be mindful of that. So yeah, are we anywhere close on this deal? No. But at the moment, it's definitely one of those markets where things always be willing to be surprised is, I guess, what I would say. I've been looking for investment properties there around 850 to 900 for 422 is price these days. Yeah. But look, again, even there, I'd say just keep close eye on it, because what we are seeing happening off market and for things that aren't yet unconditional, and also the wave of what's happening in the raw land behind what raw land is getting sold for currently off the plan. That is now squashing that gap drastically. As in, now I'm not saying these are real numbers, but let's say for argument's sake, if you need to spend 600,000 to buy a 400 square meter block, then you're going to put call it a $500,000 house on there. It's 1.1 for a 422 on a 400 square meter block. Well, if existing stock on a 800 or 900 square meter block was selling for 800, you can see how that doesn't work anymore. So something's got to happen there. Either that land new build pricing has to come back, or eventually the market goes, oh, hang on, we're not seeing value anymore in the house and lands. The established stock is now more value, so then that pushes up the established stock. Crazy hot market, bought 3 properties in 3 months, already have 7% growth. Yep, I'm working in that suburb and everything is being cut into 300 to 400. Yeah, different zoning to this, I will say. So this zoning, we can't do that. But yeah, most of the developable stock is in the next gen zoning there. So, yep. All right, guys. So that's pretty much wrapping this one up. Great interaction towards the end there. Appreciate that. You're bloody quiet as crickets at the start. I thought I was talking to myself. So I hope you got value out of that. Any final questions before we clock off? On other news, the deal that I didn't show you last week that I cancelled, I will show you a few moving parts there, which I'll share that when I can. Happy days for me today. We started civil works on one of our current projects, woohoo. So if you're wondering why it rained yesterday, it's because we put machines on site on Friday ready to start work on Monday. That's my rain dance. So if I put machines on site, it rains. Yep. No, you're very welcome, guys. Next week, I will not be running a session because I will be on a cruise ship and I have no intention of pulling out my laptop on a cruise ship. So I will see you again the following week. In the meantime, have a great time. Get out there. Guys that have been watching this that haven't been putting in offers, get out there, put some offers. Make sure you are in the market. Otherwise, this is purely entertainment. It is not education. Actually, there's a new distinction. If you're not putting it in action, it's only entertainment. So, who of you has owned... Hey, Brad, great to see you, mate. Haven't seen you in ages. Hope you're doing well, mate. Yes, and thank you. I hope to have a nice cruise. Hopefully the weather's good there. But yes, I think that's one to hold on to there. If you're not putting it into action, it's only entertainment. Great entertainment at least. Roland, not good enough from you, mate. Not good enough. I know you can put it in action, and I know you want to put it in action. So stop making it entertainment. I appreciate that it's better than Netflix. Thank you. All right, guys, have a great day, and see you in a couple of weeks.